Hi everybody, welcome to anything you want to know about disability, but were afraid to ask, part one. Uh, we hope to post so many. Just say, this webinar has been organised by the Independent Living Movement of Ireland. We're a social model-led disabled persons organisation, and what the United Nations calls a GPO. To make events more inclusive, we have we have Catherine all here as a all sign language interpreters, and we have live captions underneath the screen, which unfortunately, but you probably recognise by now, don't properly recognise Dublin Kulak cerebral palsy accent. So I have to apologise for my own captions at the same time. So today I promised that I know I was busy and I see the sun shining here in County Leitrim. So I promised I will get as close to 4 o'clock finish as we can. So just before today, because it's a webinar, there's not a chat function on this meeting, but we do have question and answers function. So if there's any burning questions you have for the panel as you go to the next hour, please post them and we'll try and get them if we can. But just to say, don't worry. This is, as I said, anything you want to know about disability, we're afraid to ask. Part one. So if you see, it's part of the series. So before welcome to the minister, I'd just like to say, put it in context for today's session. So just have a few notes here. So in terms of the context, just in terms of we're looking at we're going to have a chat with an international activist, disabled activist, Maggie Cameron, and we're going to also reflect on Maggie's comments in an early national panel of activists with James, Selena, and Amy. I'll introduce them in the world as well. But just to say that looking how the social model can challenge the oppressive disabling experiences that we as well as activists encounter. And my own experience in terms of my first disabling lived experience really as a growing up in Coolock, having to having every morning having to get on a special bus called an ambulance. My friends going, what's wrong with you? You're sick. So I get on the second bus and go from nice concrete white Coolock to lovely leafy posh Sandymount clinic every day. And because at the time, my working class parents, that was the choice. Because as parents, the choice was either for me to stay at home or having to go to a special clinical school in posh Sandymount. That's so in a way, in terms of if we talk about original sin, is that the label of spastic at the time, or medically Christians with that label, which now sounds a bit nicer, cerebral palsy, but it's still a label. And so as being an activist, the social model gives me gives me a mirror to look at how that lived experience has been shaped by oppressive, oppressive, uh, uh, oppressive suggestions and directions and signposting by a medical model system that send people, send early citizens to different directions than my Tulloch peers I grew up with. So I'd just like to start by saying by welcoming the minister uh, uh, and uh, and say that well, because the day is that we have the next 20 minutes. We have the minister long today. Then I will be in conversation with Maggie Cameron. And then I'll be asking the Dave, Selena, and Angie, who are my colleagues in the Independent Living Movement, for the reaction to and the thoughts on Maggie's experience in Scotland and her experience of the television and promoting advocacy support to the Scottish system and how we're going to learn. So I do promise to get in for 4 o'clock. So again, I just like to take this opportunity to thank you all for again joining us at this afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and I say up here in the and just to welcome the Minister for State for Children, Disability, Equality, and especially the integration with responses for disability and Robert to. So, Minister, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks very much for your introduction there. And hello to everyone. I understand that there's been a huge interest in the webinar, and rightly so. And I know that I've met some of you at different forums already, and others I look forward to meeting you as restrictions lift into the future. We are all missing the informal chats and greetings that normally accompany an event like this. But I also know that many more people are able to log on that may not have been able to attend in person. Certainly, the ILMI have done an excellent job of bringing us all together today and should be commended for doing so. I would like to start by thanking the ILMI for inviting me to open this webinar and giving me the opportunity to say a few words. However, more importantly, I would like to thank the ILMI for inviting me along today to listen and to learn. As Minister for Responsibility for Disability, I am working tirelessly to improve Ireland's standing as a place where disabled people have their rights fully realised. It would be disingenuous of me not to touch on the Ombudsman's report published today, which investigates the placements of under 65s in nursing homes. Firstly, I want to thank all of those who took part in the research and spoke of their own lived experiences in nursing homes. It's concerning to hear the difficult experiences some people have reported, and sad that some feel that their lives have been wasted. Without a doubt, for some time in this age group, nursing homes are not an appropriate placement, and alternative, more sustainable, supported living solutions are needed to give them greater independence and choice in their daily lives. I am told that there are around 1,300 under the age of 65 living in nursing homes. I can assure those gathered here today that there is a clear government commitment to reduce this and provide a pathway to eliminate this practice. In fact, in budget 2021, I ring-fenced 3 million to assist in transitioning people inappropriately placed in nursing homes to more appropriate housing options in the community. It is a start, but I know a lot more to do is a priority for me. More generally then, the government is dedicated to improving the lives of our disabled population. We are making progress in areas such as progressing the UNCRPD. As I'm sure many of you know, we will soon submit our initial state report to the committee. I recently hosted a consultation on the report, and I am immensely grateful to the many people and organisations who took the time to have their say on our report and in doing so to strengthen and improve it. Progressing key legislation that needs to be enacted, such as the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Amendment Act, taking steps to ensure that disabled people and their representative organisation are central to the development of policy. Increasing and improving services, schemes and grants that help remove barriers that disabled people face in areas like employment, education and health. I could continue, but I'm going to stop because ultimately I am here to listen and learn. I am committed to hearing from, working with and understanding the lived experience and the subject expertise that is in the disabled community. I am also committed to making sure my government, colleagues and officials across departments understand as well. If we are to achieve meaningful change, we need to adapt the way we work, the way we speak and the way we act. And we need to embed these changes into our society at every single level. As I said, government is committed and I'm committed to this journey. We want to move fully to the social model of disability. We want to continue to improve how we engage with disabled persons' organisations. And we want to make sure we get things right at all levels of what we do, from the person manning a public face desk to a senior official forming policy and drafting legislation. In advancing these goals, we need to pause every now and again and listen and learn. We can then take stock of all these jobs, of the lived lives, and start to make changes we need to do. And with that, I will finish, and I wish you all the best. And I look forward to the rest of the webinar and listening to your conversation. Thank you, Peter, and thank you again, Nina, for inviting me along. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mr. Rowland. That was fantastic, and I'm delighted that you're taking intensive speak, taking leadership in terms of the language and the role of the social model in your speech. It was a fantastic way to start the meeting. So it's set a benchmark for the rest of the speakers to follow up on that, on how right from the top in terms of minister, how that integration of the social model into the public system will be quite exciting. It's a long-term process. It's not going to happen overnight, but it'll be a very exciting experience for us activists. So thanks very much. I understood the goal reaction completely. Hoping like my particular action too. So I'm going to move ahead there. We're doing okay for time, only 3 minutes over time so far. So we'll move ahead to our main speaker, Maggie Cameron, who's come live from Northumbria. I know Maggie for a while now, and Maggie is a freelance disability equality trainer, but also Maggie did some fantastic work in Scotland on working with, as the minister says, working with systems, applying the social model. And in Scotland, from my own experience of working with the Scottish Arts Council in the 90s and the noughties, where Scotland was at the foreground of placing the social model within the Constitution, new Scottish Constitution, and I actually had to work with the Scottish Arts Council employing that social model on the ground to art groups, and it was a quite interesting experience. But Maggie has far more experience of applying social model thinking and discourse to the Scottish system. So I got 4 questions for Maggie, and I'm going to get through the questions in reasonable time, so we have a bit of time for Jez, Selena and Amy to respond and give us their thoughts on Maggie's experience. So the first question I have for Maggie, what does the word disability mean to you?
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. And it's really great to know what's going on in Ireland. It really is, compared to where I am in England, in the northeast of England just now. But as I say, with what the word disability means to me, and in a nutshell, what I have to say is, to me, disability is a social construct. Now, what I mean by that, and I think maybe the easiest way to explain, is to use the words of Simone de Beauvoir, who was a French writer, activist, and philosopher. And when she talked about women, she said, very famously, of course, she said that women were made, not born. And really what she meant by this is that when we're born, we're not secondary. We're not passive. We just are. And it's the experiences we encounter, the attitudes we encounter, the expectations that are put upon us about our appearance, the way we look, the way we act at school. You know, at schools, it's come on, girls, come on, sweetheart. Boys, it's come on, hero, come on, sport. From the very beginning, we start to take on these things. And in terms of disability, I think it's also true that, you know, we're told as disabled people that there's something wrong with us, we're not quite right, we're pitied, we're of no value. And this is all medical model thinking. And then we have the assumptions about us, what we can't do, always what we can't do, the stereotypes, all again rooted in the medical model thinking. Seeing disability is negative. And I was reminded that years ago I saw a poster from some big organization. It wasn't a disabled people's organization, it was a disability organization. And the poster was of a young boy eating breakfast. And the caption was, "Today, for the first time, Henry has made his own breakfast." And I thought, wouldn't it be great if that caption said, "For the first time, today, Henry has gone off to work, supported by his PA." You know, wouldn't that have been a message to send out? And under the medical model, there's no chance. Under the medical model, we're condemned to living in institutions, being pushed into institutions at the age of 20. The social model, the expectations are completely different. The social model views disability as external to us. We have impairments, conditions, whatever term you choose to use about yourself. Yes, we have them. But disability is imposed. And if we use this model, the social model, we own ourselves. We are whole. Because the restrictions are imposed and the barriers that are imposed and the services and the lack of services, the buildings, these are the things that restrict us. So if we see disability as external, but own our conditions, then disability is very definitely, to me, a social construct.
Okay, right. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I hope that they're really good instruction for a lot of people in terms of the difference between the medical model and the social model. And we're going to go more into detail based on my experience in Scotland. So, Maggie, when you experience in Scotland, how can the social model be applied to the development of policies and systems?
Okay, so as you're saying, in Scotland, where I worked for about 11, 12 years for an organisation called Lothian Centre for Inclusive Living, and then seconded to Self-Directed Support Scotland. I was first training officer, then training coordinator. And I have to say, with my experiences there and looking back with hindsight, I think what we achieved was really important, because first, what has to happen is we must educate. And I'm so pleased that you have the minister here. I'm so pleased that the minister is so open-minded as to come and listen, because this part of the problem is getting people to listen. We need to educate policymakers, implementers, teachers, employers, because it's not just about us making change. And we must remember also that many disabled people haven't experienced firsthand of the social model. They don't know about it themselves. And how can they? Because they have very often limited experiences. You're in a day centre or you're in segregated education. Who's going to tell you? So it's so important. And that's what we were trying to do very much in Scotland, was to create a shared understanding of what the social model meant. And also, we'll collaborate with a sister organisation as LCILs. There was one in Glasgow, because what we found was, as time progressed, organisations, charitable organisations, they were learning about the social model and using the language, but they weren't really taking the principles. And it became very difficult to have discussions with people when they were saying, oh yes, we know all about the social model. And so we're saying, okay. And then you have a discussion about implementing into a policy or what might be needed. And they're off tangent somewhere, talking about disabled people nearing carers. So, well, hang on, that's not social model. So I can't stress this enough, because this is the bedrock for change. Sitting down with people, making sure you have a shared understanding. And then you need to co-produce. And again, a true understanding of co-production. So again, what happens is I worked in a cafe that was training people with learning difficulties to prepare food, work the till, wheelchair users across the spectrum. And they had this wonderful state-of-the-art bench that went up and down, and it could be any height you wanted for wheelchair users who were doing food prep. And of course, come the day, and we'll go in, no consultation, nothing. Come the day, we go in, it's on the wrong side of the room. Yeah? So, with entirely banished wheelchair users to the wrong side, where there's nothing, for workflow that can't contribute. So, again, this has to be done. In Edinburgh City Council, if I can name Edinburgh City Council, got involved with LCIL about direct payments and creating what they called an Edinburgh card. And it was co-produced. And it was working really well until they produced the first leaflet without us. And the jargon was unbelievable. And then they got caught up in the technology. So co-production has has to work. It has to work in the sense that power is shared, and you have to create that situation from the beginning. We're also very much involved in, bearing in mind in Ireland, I don't really know much about the role of direct payments and how they're operated, so to speak. But in Edinburgh, in Scotland, direct payments, remembering being fought for by disabled people, were to enable disabled people to become employers, so they weren't tied to being put to bed at 6 o'clock, so they could stay at home. And the whole notion of changing systems to adapt to this. I guess you maybe have experience, but systems can be hard to change. People tend to take them on board. And I've got a notice that says stop, so I'm going to stop.
Sorry, Maggie.
But that is very much what we're doing in Scotland, trying to co-produce and work with things.
Thanks, Maggie. Just to give a little hint behind the scenes I'm cracking the whip for Maggie and keeping time by texting Maggie to keep it tight. But
No,
I think that's a really
absolutely.
great answer. Especially the identification of co-producing between the state system and GPOs, and again, as Maggie says, I'm delighted with the minister's straight in with the discussion about the social model and use the term disabled people. But Maggie, third question, I have 4 questions for Maggie, just the third. So Maggie, from your experience, how important is the role of GPOs? And you kind of touched on co-production, but also tell us about your experience with Scotland and England, because they're quite different experiences.
Is this the third question?
Yes.
How important is the role of a DPO? Let me put it this way. Where would you be without a strong DPO? And I will answer that because there aren't any in the northeast of England anymore. Funding's gone, dried up, disappeared. So where do I go if I want training, if I want to become an employer? Who do I ask? Who do I go to discover what options I may have? Who's going to support me through the process? Who would manage my payroll? Who will be my advocate? Who will keep me straight on employment law? Where's my peer support? Who can help me draw up a job description? Who will tell me that I need a job description? You know, I know local authorities and social services have a role on this, but they don't always have the expertise. They don't have the knowledge sometimes to take you through this. And my friend's daughter is autistic and she's recently got direct payments. And I kept saying, well, find the deep, oh no, there isn't one. Well, you'll need a job description. Oh, I don't know anything about that. They never mentioned that. She sat through an interview where they asked her, seriously, they asked her, and how long have you had autism? So for all of these things, you need a strong DPO. You have to have a DPO. In Scotland, we fed into the NHS Lothian. We fed into the Scottish Government. We fed into holding conferences, universities, social work training. We fed into absolutely virtually everything. And I just can't stress how much of a gap not having a DPO in the northeast of England is, because people are just left not knowing where to turn. So it is very important that you have DPOs and more of them.
Okay, really really strong confident answer around the DPOs. I know myself working with the UNCRPD back in New York and in all these working with the GPO NGO group in New York that the amount of because you are working on the social model, the amount of work we could cover quite quickly. That's why I think in the end, the UN Convention was one of the quickest conventions ever published. And I think that strong social model undercurrent in the UN Convention helped us get over a lot of cross and permanent barriers and come to a collective script at the end and text at the end in 2006. So my final question for Maggie, and again, which is great, the Minister touched on this as well. The Minister was very clear, used the term disabled people. It's something personally I've been quite keen to campaign since the late 80s and 90s. For years, when we had no GPO, there wasn't that platform to push for this, the importance of language, the importance of language can direct and sometimes guide policy. So I'm going to ask Maggie, final question for Maggie is, does it really matter if people use the term disabled people or people with disabilities?
Well, way back when, I think, first of all, language matters. We have to be aware of how it colours our thinking. Not in a PC way, which is used to sort of ridicule what we think. But if you think about how just even phrasing stuff, how language just shapes, what women should wear, rather than educating men, calling us vulnerable. The language is really, really important. And it is always sort of like that undercurrent. So in terms of what the language is trying to say, it's important, I think, to think about these things. And I have to say that initially, a long time ago, my preferred term was people with disabilities. A long time ago it was. And I think the people first argument, which is essentially what that is, was valid because it came at a time when we're still very much objectified. So, we were the disabled. If you think back to Victorian times, we were not only objectified, we were quantified. We were scientific experiments. We were less than people. We were locked away and very much considered to be less than nothing. And so I think to counter all of that, when we first started real activism, it was important to say we're people first, to push this message that we are people first. But, over time, ideas and notions aren't static. And over time, when we start to develop the social model, it makes us really reconsider if people first argument is really still valid. Because if we're starting to look at disability within the social model as a social construct, then the people first argument doesn't hold water anymore. Because of course we're people, but Black people, you don't say people with blackness. So we can now look at it, I think. We had time to reflect and say disabled people makes us a collective group, to have a voice. It says to me, disabled people says, I'm not alone. I don't need to change. Disabled people says to me, society needs to change. We need to challenge the barriers, not ourselves. And that for now, It really is the time to let go of the people first argument and say, we are disabled people. I think I'm in
Thanks,
time.
Maggie. Yeah, brilliant. That, again, the importance of language and how it goes hand in hand with policy and with systems and directing and guiding and improving systems. So we're going to take Maggie's fantastic answers to the core questions I asked and some really interesting points that I would love to chat about, but my job here is to crack the whip. So I'm going to go to a gorgeous panel of Des, Selena, and Amy. Des is a CEO of a number of disability organizations and chairperson of quite loads of different organizations, but is currently chairperson of the independent living movement. And Selena is a public servant in Dublin, and also an activist in the city for years. We were together on the Forum of People with Disabilities, and which going back to the intensive systems, how we stopped the first disability bill in 2001. That was a direct engagement with the social model and the parliamentary system. But again, today, I can't emphasize so much the importance of the minister starting off with the language of disabled people and the thinking and the paradigm of the social model. That was a fantastic start today and really gave a context to Maggie's input for experience in Scotland and England. So, Des, would you like to say a few words about just maybe keep to about 2 minutes? Well, any thoughts on Maggie's reflections?
I found Maggie's presentations interesting in several ways, but very hopeful in the sense that sometimes we think in Ireland that we're very bad and that we're only making it, gradually or sometimes not at all. But what's happening out there isn't as great in the big island closest to us as sometimes we think it might be. We grew our own form of, if you like, DPOism in the personality of two people back in the 90s, Martin Loughlin and Donald Toolan. And with them aging and with their demise, there was a lacuna in the development of DPOism. I want to call it that for a minute. The extent to which disabled people could actually bring a certain new tapestry to a new collective rather than a personality-driven DPOism. And I think ILMI is actually delivering and building on that. And the strange thing, as the minister pointed out, is that it has come to us by accident because of the extent to which we've had to use Zoom and had to reach out to people and bring them close to us. So I think, Maggie, that we're probably not that bad in terms of formulating an inclusion. Now we have to work that up. And I'm saying all that in the context that my activism, as it were, grew out of an association with disabled people's organizations, and mainly blind organizations in Europe and in the United States. So collectively, we worked as DPOs to bring about change at European level, and we went to where power is actually created. So we would have formulated the air passenger rights for disabled people. We would have formulated the web directive, bus and coach directive for people with disability, and in many ways contributed to a lot of what goes on and is taken for granted today. I have in my hand the box that I haven't a clue what it is. That box is my disability. That's the medical model of this, or disability. and it becomes solved through the social model of disability. When I look on the other side, and written on it is Nurofen 200 milligrams, go to tablets. And every supermarket and every chemist shop you go into today in Ireland, Europe, or wherever will have the tablet type and dosage written in Braille. And that was brought about through disabled people's organizations working as a collective. So that's the hope that I think if we reach out, learn from Maggie, that maybe we're not too bad, but some ways she can bring learning to us. And if we look beyond ourselves, we will find a new inclusion for the disabled people's organizations. And it must be more than one. We must be able to allow for people to collect in groups particular to their particular interests. That's me for now, I think, Peter.
I'll be coming back to you, so don't worry. Don't take too many tablets, because I'll be back in a few minutes. So Selena, you're a public servant for quite a number of years, and you've been promoting the social model in the public service system, and also you're a co-chair of DPO. What do you think of Maggie's experience in Scotland?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to hear from Maggie, because I think kind of cross-border or cross-country and international peer consultancy is so important, that we all have something to give and take from those interactions. So I'm delighted that Maggie had the time to be with us today. There's a couple of things that kind of came to mind while I was listening to both the minister and to Maggie, and considering today's announcement or report from the Ombudsman. It's such an important report this morning, and it's something that ILMI, I know, we've been very conscious of for quite a while. Even our Christmas card, the image that we chose was in reference to the amount of disabled people that I would have to say have not been placed in nursing homes, and that they've been involuntarily incarcerated. And I think when we're talking about language, we need to use the correct language. They've not been placed, they've been incarcerated. And it's wonderful that maybe from today, people will start to be paroled and pardoned and freed and not be held guilty because of their impairments. So I think it really is a wonderful day today. It's the start of something big. So it's just fantastic. I was quite emotional when I saw the RTE news this morning. As you say, I work within the public sector. I kind of jumped the fence back in 2002 from being in the NGO movement, because I've always believed that it's very important to be an activist and to lobby, but at some stage you also need to become the change maker. So I've been very lucky to have been the Access and Equality Officer with South Dublin County Council for many years now, and it's quite a rewarding position to be in. When Maggie talked about the importance of the social model, and just one practical example I would give you from the point of view of public service or service provision to diverse communities, is that if you work through and come from a social model ethos and understanding, it enables you to ask the right questions so that you can then provide the right services in an inclusive and accessible way. So for example, rather than asking, does your disability stop you from using our parks? Why don't you ask, what can we do to change our parks so that you can use them? So rather to focus in that way, so they're working by a social model, you're asking the right questions. And we all hear about government being focused on value for money. And yet we then see that the people with the lived experience are not listened to, and therefore the money is spent in the wrong way. So through working from a social model perspective, we can do things much better in a more dignified, equal and inclusive way. So I think just kind of to finish.
I'm going to crack the whip there. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just to say, my key thing is, one is to remember that access is more than ramps. So we need to look at it from a DPO or a cross impairment perspective, and to just remembering how valuable it is to listen to the people with lived experience, even as as Maggie mentioned about where the table was placed, and what a waste of time and money that was, and the barriers it created. To listen to lived experience.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Again, I'm going to come back in a few minutes to add that. And just move on to Amy. And Amy, you're a bit like myself, and not only an activist, but you're also an academic as well. But also you're trying to take that, come down, jump off that academic tower into working with another DPO. What's your thoughts on that, Maggie's reflection experience with the Scottish public system?
I have a lot of thoughts. But the one I want to highlight, I suppose, and it kind of comes back to Selena's point about value for money, is when I think about the social model, I think we need to start thinking about how we implement that, or what that means once we kind of take that as being the way that we need to think about things. What it essentially means is we change disabled people from being recipients of charity, recipients of, the kindness of other people, to being people who have an expertise. So when we accept the social model and that it is everybody's responsibility, whether we are organizations or individuals or members of society, to make things accessible, then disabled people have a really important role because we're experts and we know how to do this. And disabled persons organizations, or DPOs, which are organizations run by and led by disabled people, we are kind of basically collections of this expertise, and we need to be valued as such. And when I say valued, I mean we need to have like a meaningful input in terms of policy making and decision making, like not just being called in for a consultation every here and there to give our opinions and then, gently told where the door is. We need to be meaningfully engaged in making decisions and in policy making, and not just one disabled person, like a number of disabled persons with different experiences. And also our time and our expertise needs to be valued, and I mean that monetarily too. We as a DPO, we cannot keep up, Disabled Women Ireland, we can't keep up with the pace with which we are being asked to consult on things or participate in things, because we don't have, disabled people are twice as likely to live in poverty as non-disabled people, and half as likely to be employed. And yet every time we're called upon to consult or to participate in different committees, when we go and we say, well, look, are people going to be compensated for that in terms of money? There's like maybe not. And I'm like, how can I send a disabled person to go and give their expertise pro bono when we're already more likely to be impoverished, less likely to be employed? It's not fair. So we need to see disabled people as being experts and DPOs as being organizations of experts.
Thanks, Amy. And that was brilliant, because you saved me. I thought I'd have to jump in with the definition of DPO, but there's a lot of questions on the website about what is a DPO, and I think you gave a wonderful explanation. But also, just in terms of here, all the panel here, all the activists, but we all have different impairments or different impairment labels. So so we can't come together in a medical model way based on supposedly impairment. It's a social model. It's the lived experience of being together. So but I want to ask to go back to Selena. Selena, what do you think are the challenges of applying the social model to other systems and structures in the public? I think
I think I know, as someone who works in a local authority, one of the very kind of practical challenges we've often experienced is trying to balance the need for accessibility, but the need to mitigate against antisocial behavior, and trying to kind of balance that and to make sure that we find creative ways where we can balance that and not just use that as an excuse to not provide accessibility to disabled people. So from a very practical kind of local authority service provision point of view, that would be an example I would give you. But I really would go back to my point about, and to Amy's point, about the need to learn from people and listen to and value the input from people with lived experience. And not just as members of society that you bring in and consult with, but also to look at your employee profile and ensure that your employee profile is diverse and recognizes the diversity of society as well. And there can be challenges with that. For example, in recent years, the public sector and the civil service have become very enamored with this psychometric testing, where you've got to do these really quick English and maths tasks on a computer, and, you know, God help you if you can't do it. And that has excluded a lot of amazing candidates at the first step. And when you challenge about, well, what about reasonable accommodation, etc., their standard answer is quite often, well, we give extra time if people need it, but sometimes it's not the extra time that people need. So that is a challenge as well. And it's something I kind of, it's a bit of a bugbear, because I remember trying one of these tests, just because I like to personally try these things before I give an opinion. And even like if I'd had to do that back in 2002, I certainly wouldn't have got my job, despite the fact that I've got a master's degree and God knows what else. So, you know, we're setting people up to fail, like the problem that a lot of disabled parents and disabled mothers are having in this country at the moment, where the services are setting them up to fail, and babies and children are being ripped from mothers' arms. And we're not talking about that. Maybe the Ombudsman needs to look at that issue as well as his next part on his to-do list. But these are the challenges at the moment, that, from my opinion.
I'm glad you mentioned about disabled parents. I know myself, when I was on the board of the National Advocacy Service, we had up to 12,000 cases of disabled parents encountering disabling barriers for the social services as well. But Des, what's your thoughts on the challenges or effectively applying the social model in an Irish context?
I think the one thing that worries me deeply is the extent to which, by accident more than design, the voluntary service industry, I call it such, somehow has control of lots of the difficulties that we perceive in employment. They will advocate for employment, but they won't employ us themselves, or they won't go beyond their own disability type for somebody with intellectual disability to be hired in a blind organization, or somebody who uses a wheelchair to be employed in an intellectual disability organization. So that industry somehow shuts disabled people out from employments. And I think we will find as we go forward that some of the money we need, as Amy described, to be DPOs and funding of advocacy has to come from some letting go of the funds from the voluntary sector side of service provision. And I'm not in any way, while I talk about it in kind of probably very, they're not meant to be harsh tones, they're very direct tones. The sector does give and provide us with things that otherwise wouldn't happen. But freedom of expression and the right to organise must be given back to disabled people, and the funding to allow the likes of the DPOs to grow and multiply. And don't try and confine it to one DPO. I think you must look to a multiplicity of talents and experiences as described, bringing that expertise to everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. I know my own experience working in the arts up in the Northwest, where in the morning in a local arts centre, I had a group of disabled adults doing plays about sex, drugs and rock and roll. But in the afternoon, they had to go across the road and use crayons and get an ice cream. So there is a lot of work to do that, and this is why we're not saying close down the disability sector, but then the DPOs can work and they can listen to experience as well. And Amy, how do you, as with DPOs, the disabled in the world, what do you think are the challenges, social model challenges to applying the paradigm to other systems and structures?
Well, I don't think it'll be surprising that I'm going to say resources is a big thing, and that we do struggle to get enough resources, even to make our own organization accessible. You know, things like affording ISL interpretation, and dealing with the administration side of an organization. We need more support and supporting capacity building in these kind of ways. I think that's a really fundamental thing. And then, you know, if those funding streams become available, I mean, we represent, you know, disabled people of kind of all marginalized genders, but we can't cover it all. We need more DPOs covering different elements of things, because we can't be all things to all people. And so I think that's an essential thing. I would say another thing that I kind of feel is something that impairs us or makes it more challenging to do our work is kind of the history of the charity-based model of handing our disabled people or vulnerable people, however you define that, whether it be unwed mothers or other kind of marginalized groups, off to charity organizations, and allowing them to speak on behalf of those marginalized people. I would say we still have a lot of hang-ups and a lot of work to do in terms of moving away from that model to actually speaking to the people for whom, you know, the issue is most relevant and they have the most lived experience of.
And we got about 4 minutes left, and my final question for the panel, and Amy, would you lead down this, right? What would you like the audience and the minister to take away from today? What social model confidence would you like to communicate?
For me, it would be A, an understanding of the social model is fundamentally important, and B, understanding, therefore, that from the social model, disabled people are experts in the lived experience of disability and of making things accessible to disabled people, and should be treated as experts and given the respect and the dignity that they deserve as experts. That would be my kind of fundamental.
Thank you, Belinda. And Selena, what would you like people to take away from today?
Well, first of all, I would echo what Amy said in relation to recognising and valuing the experts by experience. But as was the one thing I would like to kind of point out, and it's certainly evident if you even look at the minister's title, department title, Children, Disability, Equality and Integration, and that's the issue of intersectionality. And what I mean by that is that it's not just about making services for disabled people accessible, it's about making all services accessible, because like I'm a mother, I'm a disabled person, I'm a woman. So I have intersection, I have different sides to me. There are disabled LGBTQI members, there are disabled people with indirect provision. You know, we're everywhere. That's the, you know, so it's everything needs to be accessible. So I would urge all kind of policymakers and service providers here today to remember we are more than just disabled people, and so everything needs to be equality proofed and access proofed.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Stina. We're much more than disabled people. I'm a disabled activist, but also I can also just come back and fill up as well. So Des, what would you like people to take away from today?
I think, am I on? I'm back alive again, am I? I'm not mute.
No,
okay. Okay, so no, sometimes with mute, this thing just talks to me when it shouldn't, and it doesn't talk when it should. I think what I would like to take is what has been said already about the expertise around disability and the extent to which problems that arise in society or in shaping things can be offered solutions by people who are experts. But I think in the way Selena put it in the end, I think disabled people have to be seen as equals within a community. They should be invited to be members of and probably chair of the local residents association. They should commit themselves, disabled people, and that's partly to do with them as well. You can't sit back. If you want some help, and I think we have to go for support and allies and people to allow things happen with us, for us, and also together as a community. We've got to participate as part of that community, be it a camera club, whatever it might be, residents association, trade union, or whatever. I think all of that is important.
All right, and thanks, yes, and thanks to Amy and for being a fantastic panel. And I think, already said that everyone will play the social model. Things like words like integration can actually become quite medical model in terms of young. I know my own experience there. A few years ago, working with a youth club in the West of Ireland, where it was about integrating disabled young people, and we changed it over to including disabled young people, and it changed the whole process. So the danger with the word integration is that the person has to integrate, not the system has to change or transform. So even that simple application of social model thinking can change the language. So just to finish off, and we have we're a minute over time, but maybe you can hang on for 2 more minutes. Can you hang it back to Maggie? And Maggie, any closing remarks from the international guest speaker?
Okay, just to say that you've all made so many important points. I would just really like to say that I think it's Amy or Selena, but asking the right questions, that is so important with the social model. That, I think, is one of the biggest things that you can get from it, because you can just turn everything back on its head. And that is a way of challenging in a positive way. I think the point about paid work, paid consultations is also crucial, because if you think about it, for some strange reason, people don't value what they don't pay for. I find this so odd, but there you go. I think that is important. I think just to say that a starting point is always, I've sat in meetings, people say, it won't work. I would just like to say, people sit in a meeting and saying, I don't know how we're going to make it work, but we will. If we all input into this and our end goal is making it work, it will. And the last thing really I'd like to say, apart from thanking you for inviting me, is that just to mention in England, and you are streets ahead, so obviously, in England, there was a scheme called Disability Confident for employers. And the scheme itself was great. The idea would be to educate employers so that they would be more confident about employing disabled people, about what they might need to do, what they might not need to do, that it won't cost the earth. Inclusion can be sometimes as simple as reorganizing an office. I think as an idea, it's brilliantly simple. I would say, as a rider of prevention here, what it was used to do was basically employ non-disabled people, employers, to offer training to non-disabled employers on what disabled people wanted. So for me, that was a tragic fail. But the idea is really good. And I think, if it worked well, it could be so beneficial to everyone. I just, again, want to say I've really enjoyed talking with you all, and good luck for the future.
Thanks, Maggie, and fantastic. We're less than 5 minutes, we're just 5 minutes over time. So I'd like to thank everybody, and especially thank all the Catherine, sign language interpreters. Thanks the fantastic ILMI staff in the background, especially CEO Damien and Nina Communications, and Dr. James Casey for doing fantastic work in the background there, addressing the question and answers, and thanks very much to Des, Amy, and Selena, our panel, for fantastic insights and how to apply the social model in other contexts. But very much thanks to Maggie for setting that international context, and also looking at possible partnerships with the maybe independent Scotland in the future, which I know myself work in Scotland, so seeing the social model actually makes its way down to the ground level is actually seen as an idea, a paradigm, a model coming to life. It's just great. It's a fantastic experience, but also, again, I'd like to go thank the minister, but also with the minister, go back to your fantastic opening speech, which laid out the language and the model context of today. You know, we really appreciate it. It was a fantastic surprise, and we're going to build on that relationship. So again, this is everything you want to know about disability, but refer to ask part 1. And we will be definitely holding more webinars like this in the coming months. So thanks everybody, and thanks for sticking around. Bye. See you then.